first thing to do is think about the kind of SaaS company you are. Some companies are selling to a lot of consumers, see much higher churn, and this is normal. This is okay. If you're selling something for hundreds of thousands of dollars a year, maybe having double-digit churn is going to be a bit more of an issue. So the first thing is understanding which bucket you're in. The second thing is to think about churn holistically. It's not just a set of tactics to help stop people canceling. And here at Paddle, we think about that on two axes. So number one, the voluntary versus involuntary, people choosing to cancel versus people not choosing to cancel, but their subscription ending anyway, normally due to failed payments. And then on the second axis, is this before or after a churn event? And with that axis, you end up with a nice cross, a 2x2. Who doesn't love a 2x2? And the goal is to fill in that with strategies. So be that cancellation offers in the top right. How do you stop people from when they're choosing to cancel? How do you stop payments failing in the first place? And really, the best-in-class churn reduction strategies are about covering all four of those.
So the reason why the way you collected payment initially matters ultimately is because if you have bad data going in, you're gonna have bad results on the other side. So with churn, obviously, it's not just about ensuring that first transaction goes through or the initial transaction. It's about ensuring over the life cycle, over the lifeline of that customer wanting to use your product, that the data supports that transaction type, meaning that the appropriate entities understand that, one, there is authorization and authentication from this buyer about not only the first transaction, but any transaction that comes after. And another thing that is really important when you're collecting this transactional information is, again, recognizing that initially what this person is going to pay and what they're going to pay in the future can differ, not only because it may have started as a free trial, but also sometimes there's things like usage, right? And that differs. So are you communicating that to the buyer? Because if you're not, then that buyer likely has the opportunity to dispute this charge, right? And a lot of times when you see fraud as a reason for these transactions being rejected, it's not true fraud, it's friendly fraud. It's either this buyer actually is not satisfied with the product and they didn't see an easy way in which to cancel it, or this buyer did not think they would be paying whatever was just charged on their statement. Another reason is maybe they don't recognize the name of your company on their credit card statement, right? Because maybe what you're using as your domain and what you're using on credit card statements are different. So it's making sure all of that information is also really transparent and communicated at the time of purchase. Making sure the buyer knows exactly what they're receiving also matters. The most important thing to do in order to optimize your processes is to ensure that you are up to date on what the current mandates and requirements are. And those things change as well. Especially we saw quite a lot of this over COVID, where there was probably something that was put in place and then was delayed because of everything that happened in the world, but are now full speed ahead. For instance, you have places like India where, and this is completely different behavior than most of the rest of the world, we are used to having to request 3DS authorization on the initial purchase. And that's why, because the buyer is present at the time of this transaction. I mean, obviously they're not at the location, but they're with their device at the time that they are transacting. At least that's what we're trying to prove. However, in India, there's a rule that's now saying on all recurring payments, we have to request 3DS as well. And if we don't, then this transaction will immediately be declined. So you need to give yourself the best chance to even have the opportunity to engage with this buyer by first knowing that that's even a rule, or what you could see happening in India specifically is your recurring transactions plummeting completely. And it's just because of that lack of awareness about that type of rule. So I would say in order to optimize, you have to first know. And it's quite a lot to manage because they change from time to time, and they also range from country or region. one country or region to another.
Type of churn that you're referring to there is voluntary churn, and this is where customers are actively choosing to cancel their subscriptions with you. And at Paddle, we see this accounting for roughly 60 to 80% of SaaS companies' customer churn. And these customers are choosing to cancel for a wide variety of reasons, such as deeming your product to be too expensive, or they've already feel like they've achieved what they set out to do with your product. But the common thread through all of these reasons is that the customer no longer wants to exchange their own money or their department's budget for their own perceived value of your product. This, well, efforts exist across the entire customer lifecycle to minimize churn and boost retention. So this isn't an issue that just exists for customer success. This is a product issue. This is a marketing issue, sales, if you have a sales team as well. But for instance, even at a very early stage of initially acquiring that customer on your pricing and plans page, you should ask yourself, is what we're actually asking our customers to pay for in our plans, which is known as your value metric, reflective of the value that the customer is actually going to experience when they're using your product? And if there's any sort of misalignment here, then this will lead to customers voluntarily churning later on. And then another example, so once your customers have actually subscribed and they're going through your onboarding process, ask yourself the question, does this onboarding process actually get our customers to realizing the value of our product as quickly as possible? And you're really aiming to reduce that time to value to avoid that particularly painful churn where you're losing customers right after you acquire them.
So overall, the customer experience is really important when you manage your subscriptions and you want to reduce churn and improve the customer lifetime value. So ideally, you want to give customers a way to manage their subscriptions on their own. So whether they want to upgrade, downgrade, if they want to have add-ons on their subscriptions, or even if they want to cancel, give them an easy way to do these kind of things. Making the subscription management easy for your customers is really important, even when it's about cancellation, because cancellations are the last touch point that a customer may have with you. And if you make that easy for them, there is a higher chance that they might actually reactivate. Also, possibly make it easy to actually reactivate their subscription if they want to come back to you. This also increases the customer lifetime value that you have if somebody reactivates. Another method you can use is pausing and unpausing, where people don't actually cancel their subscription, but actually just stop using your product for a certain time. The important part is really to be flexible and let customers handle their subscriptions flexibly towards their needs. Is that you understand why your customers want to cancel their subscription. And based on that, you can look at what are good alternatives to canceling. As I said, seasonality might be a thing. Then also subscribers might use your app for irregular tasks, such as research, where you have two mechanics you could use. Either you could reduce your price point and keep the subscription active, so it doesn't make sense for them to cancel. Or you could also think about letting them pause and only activate the subscription as they need it, or even look at models like usage-based models where they pay per use rather than on a constant basis.
Yeah, so I think the first thing to admit to yourself is, as a product-led SaaS company, you're going to experience churn on some level. But the opportunity that some SaaS companies miss is really gathering those reasons for churn and why customers are choosing to leave you in the first place. So as an absolute bare minimum, SaaS companies should be collecting these cancellation reasons from their customers. And then most importantly, feeding these learnings back into all elements of the product and customer experience. So for instance, if they're leaving because they're missing a certain product feature, then make sure this is being fed back to your product and engineering teams to consider on the roadmap. Potentially customers are leaving because they deem your product too expensive. Again, make sure this is fed back into your pricing and billing model considerations so that you can iterate, test, and improve your pricing and billing. And also importantly here, no two customers are going to be the same. So you should be using this churn data in helping define your buyer personas and building your customer segments. So that information should be going back to your marketing team. And finally, importantly, if there are changes that are made on a product or pricing or billing model level that address these concerns that customers had when they left you, then let them know. Close the feedback loop. Let these customers know of these changes via win-back campaigns, through one-to-few or one-to-many marketing channels.